Okay, so a little reminder. First of all, check if you could do this in your head. Put the answers down. If you got positive 1 here, great. If that didn't work for you, again, we think of a number line. And this one says start at -4, and you're going to add 5. Add 5 goes 5 in this direction. Where is that going to end? It's going to end right here at positive 1. So again, if we're having trouble with our positives and our negatives, we can think of our number line. So -15 plus -7. The answer is -22. If we think of our number line, we're starting at -15. We see add, which normally would go in this direction to the right, but we're adding a negative, and whenever we have a negative, negative switches the direction. So adding a -7 is the same as subtracting 7. You go back 7 in this direction, and you'll get to -22. -6 minus a -4. Okay? The answer is going to be -2. Sometimes if we're subtracting a negative, we can think that's the same as adding, right? Because subtracting, here's our number line again. Here's -6. Subtracting would go in this direction, but then the negative switches it around, so it goes in this direction. And if you're going in that direction, that's the same as adding. This one has multiple steps, so we can work one at a time. 26 minus 15 is? That's 11, so we still have plus a -4 minus 7. 11 plus a -4. Okay, 11, you start at 11, plus would go that way, but the negative would go the opposite direction, so this is the same as 11 minus 4, and you would get 7. And then you have 7 minus 7, 0. So that's a little review of integers. Again, integers can cause you problems if you try to do it too quickly, but if you think about where you are on your number line and what direction you're going, you can find that that can be super helpful. Little review of multiplication and division. Remember, we talked about the dot as a representation of multiplication. So if you have a positive number times a positive number, your answer will be positive. If you have a positive number times a negative number, your answer will be negative. And if you have a negative number times a negative number, your answer will be positive. So when you're multiplying, you can multiply your numbers like normal. What's 7 times 4? 28. And then, is it going to be positive or negative? You can decide at the end. It's going to be negative because you have a positive number times a negative number. 4 times 5 is 20. A negative times a negative, positive. Now, you don't have to write a positive sign out in front. Okay? Sometimes if you do that, you've at least told yourself, I checked it. 6 times 3, 18. Will this one be positive or negative? Negative. Same thing for dividing. Same rules as multiplication. In D, 39 divided by -13. First of all, what's 39 divided by 13? Whew. It's going to be 3. Sometimes if you're having trouble with something like that, because 13 isn't on your times table, when we're doing 39 divided by 13, we're really asking how many 13s could I count to get up to 39? 1 13, 2 13s is 26, 3 13s would be 39. And will this one be positive or negative? Negative. Positive divided by negative would be negative. This one is on your times table. 7 times what is 63? It is 9. And a negative divided by a negative will be? Positive. Again, you don't need to write it there. So that's the integer work that we did before we all used whole numbers. What we're going to now is to try to do this same work but use integers. So here's our first question, using integers, using decimals, using rational numbers. I know it's supposed to snow tomorrow, so I shouldn't have had an average temperature in January question. I'm sorry about that. In Winnipeg, the average temperature in January is minus 16 degrees. The average temperature in July is 19.5 degrees. First, we're going to estimate, and then we're going to calculate exactly. So we can write, once you've written down this question in your notes, we're going to do the estimate first. So when doing an estimate, we don't like to use the decimals because it makes the mental math harder. So our estimate, we're going to see the difference between negative 16 and change the 19.5 to 20 degrees. That's going to make our estimate easier. If you think about this on a number line, we've got 20 over here, minus 16 over there. How much of a temperature change is that? Okay? Does it make sense that this is 20 to 0 and this is 16 there? So the total difference between the temperatures, our estimate would be 36 degree difference. Now the math, once we've seen what that is, how do you figure out how much are between numbers? Like if I gave you two positive numbers, what's the difference between 4 and 7? What would you do? If I give you two positive numbers and said, can you find the difference between those temperatures? One day it was 7 degrees, one day it was 4 degrees. What's the difference between those 2 days? 3 degrees, okay? What happens if I told you one day was 15 degrees, the other day was 7 degrees? What's the difference between those 2 days? 8. So what were you doing mathematically? You were subtracting, right? When you want to find the difference between two things, you subtract. Now in this case, we want to find the difference between 20 and minus 16. So we're going to subtract 20 minus a negative 16. And what does subtracting a negative do? It adds 20 plus 16, and we get 36. So when we're trying to find a difference, well, a difference is subtracting, but when we subtract a negative, it ends up adding. The number line really shows you why that adding works, because you've got 20 spaces until you get to 0, and then another 16 spaces until you get to negative 16. So it would make sense that you would take that 20 plus the 16 to find the difference between them all. That was our estimate. Now, if we want to find the actual one, it wasn't 20 degrees, it was 19.5. And we would have to subtract a negative 16. So we can say, well, that's the same, subtracting a negative is the same as adding. And any time that we have decimals in this class, we'll be able to use our calculator. So in this case, I want to find out what's 19.5 plus 16. Okay? And that's a good thing to do. Test your mental math before you push enter. 35.5. One of the ways you could have done this mental math is said, hey, the only thing I changed from my estimate is I changed my 20 to 19.5. I went down 0.5 degrees. Notice my answer is down 0.5 degrees. So we can use, sometimes our estimate can actually help us figure out our mental math with the exact values. So I want you to take out your calculator. First of all, we're going to estimate, do an estimate for each of these, and then use your calculator to find the real answer. Yeah, but you're first going to, so for your estimate, I'll do the first one here with you. What is 3.8 really close to? 4. Plus, what's 4.4 close to? Still probably closest to 4. So if I did 4 plus 4, my estimate would be 8. So there's our estimate. Then see if you can figure out your actual answer. 3.8 plus 4.4 ends up being 8.2. So our estimate wasn't bad. Some of these have some more negatives. So we do an estimate first, and in your estimate, negative 3.8, it's close to negative 4 plus 4. My estimate is 0. My actual value is, and you type that into your calculator. I just type it into my head, but we'll see how close I am. 0.6. So we have 6 of these to do. These are your first 3. Here are your next 3. Once you've got these 3 completed and you have shown either Miss V or myself, then take out your textbook and turn to page 60 and work on questions 4 and 5. I can go back to the other one. 4 and 5 on page 60.